Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Viking Update Show here on Talk North, produced by the great Davide Rosso. And I am Jon Krawczynski from The Athletic with my athletic counterpart, Alec Lewis. We have dropped the dead weight of Jim Souhan for this week. He is off in some tropical location to be determined and announced at a later date. And, he's always out gallivanting. I am always the one left back here doing the hard work and keeping this show going. But that is my plight. Here's where we are. We are going to talk some Vikings. We are going to talk about the quarterback, obviously. We'll talk about the GM update. We will talk about all sorts of different things about the Purple over the next 30 or 40 minutes here. We are brought to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studios, and we are also brought to you by Onyx Maps. So, Alec, man, we are not sort of in, I would say, like the dead period of the calendar, but we are in a little bit of a lull here, post Super Bowl, pre combine and all that. Just are you able to kind of be more of a human being here over this next week or two before it picks up again?
Yeah, it's funny. I was asked at the dentist this morning if this is the quietest time of the year. And I said, it's the first quiet time in a long time, but I fly Sunday to Indianapolis for the combine, which will be a week of, I don't know, schmoozing with folks across the league and probably the first real glimpse into what the next month holds. And the next month is going to be massive for this organization. We'll probably find answers to the quarterback question. The team's going to have to make a lot of moves salary cap wise, and I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, the NFL is brilliant in that they structure their offseason cycle literally 3 breaths after the Super Bowl, because why would they not? It's been nice to have a break, and that will be over quite soon.
I as a journalism aficionado, and we both have done this for a long time now. I always lament that Hunter S. Thompson never got a crack at the combine, fear and loathing at the Indianapolis combine. It can be explosive and debaucherous and all of the things.
I mean, it is, people don't, I don't know if I should say this or not, but like, I have never been in Lucas Oil Stadium to see the events. Like, I wouldn't even know how to get in there, because it is just hotel to hotel, texting with agents, texting with team people. You run into somebody in the lobby, that leads to an hour conversation, and then you see another coach. It is indescribable for folks who don't get to experience it, but it's a blast. It is fun. It's cool to see everybody that you've got to know over the time covering the league. So I enjoy it. I love it. By the end of it, I think I feel ill, but it's worth it.
This is going to be an interesting combine for you, Alec, in terms of going there with the organization in some sort of, it's not limbo, but it's just an interesting spot where, Rob Brzezinski is kind of the acting head of the football operations department. And there is sort of this idea that eventually down the road, they will conduct a full search for a general manager and possibly bring in someone new. But also, to have a team going into this combine period and draft preparation period this way is unique. Like, what can you tell us about maybe where, or if anything has progressed, and like what more clarity you have just on how they're running things, as an important part of the calendar comes up here?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is an interesting, way to approach what is such an important period. Like I think I probably said this last time I was on, there were a lot of people throughout the league who were like, man, it's interesting to enter into this quarterback question in free agency, not knowing who your long-term decision maker is going to be. Now, you know this, John, and I've learned this a lot over the last few weeks. I mean, the amount of respect that people in the industry have for Rob Brzezinski allows this thing to be on as stable footing as possible. And Rob, over the last, I kind of find it funny because he's often perceived and described as like the cap wizard, but what he really has been is like the primary negotiator, the relationship builder with folks that you need to have relationships with to acquire talent. Like Rob has been a point person in that realm for a long time, much longer than I can even imagine doing this. And so in past years, he was the one at the combine meeting directly with Drew Rosenhaus to gauge where things might be from a market standpoint. So it's not going to be that crazy of a shift in that regard. Now, the coaching influence is going to be massive when we were talking about Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores and those two guys. I expect whether it's combine interviews, whether it's evaluation, their voice to weigh heavily in the players that the Vikings end up targeting. And then it's going to be incumbent upon Rob Brzezinski to lead the staff, to lead meetings, and to provide bumpers to some of the decision making that they are going to make over the course of the next month. But I would say, as different and interesting of a structure as this is, it doesn't feel to me like it's something they cannot handle and handle well, just considering the experience of a guy like Rob Brzezinski and the amount of hats that he's worn over the years, frankly.
Yeah. Do you feel like, is this one of those classic sort of reactions from an ownership group of kind of swinging the opposite way? Whether you hire an offensive coach, he doesn't work, you go to a defensive coach. You hire a disciplinarian, then you go to a player coach, and back and forth. Is this a case right now, do you think, where the Will family said, hey, we went outside the box last time with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. We hired an unconventional candidate, brought him in here, and he was a complete outsider to this organization. And that didn't work the way that we wanted it to. And so do you think that this is more of a reach back to familiarity, to relationships, to those types of things? Or do you leave open the possibility that when the dust settles here, that, hey, maybe they do go and get someone else that has no connection to this organization to run the front office long term?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it is a shift currently toward the more relational side of things. And it's more than anything, it's like, do all of the key parties at play have a level of trust and respect in one another that the decision making that they are going through will lead to the most optimal result? And that's for the present. I think in the longer term, it's possible that you could even marry those two worlds up of we have someone of deep personnel experience that the coaches are going to respect and trust. And we also have someone with the institutional knowledge of the place and of the people already here. And I think marrying those two worlds would be something that makes sense. I have found it not humorous, but in some ways it's like, Rob Brzezinski will be judged on how the next 3 months goes. It's like, well, if you'd have judged last year's free agency period right after it happened, you would have probably said, man, they did a great job in terms of acquiring talent. So, I would expect at this point, this ownership group to take a very big picture, long-term overall view to try to structure this thing in a way that, there is immense faith and respect internally of the process at which they're making decisions. And that's really the place that I believe they know they have to get to, and that I believe they will go, attempt to get to, over the next few months. But again, just to reiterate a little bit on Rob, like there's no doubt that he commands the trust level and respect right now of the coaches already in place. That is something that has become very clear in all of my conversations because of the way he's managed situations now for a long time. Like he is Rob, and you know this, John, better than I do. Like he's never been a self-promoter. He's never been someone who doesn't make decisions for the betterment of the organization as a whole. And while his entry into the NFL was very much from a salary cap negotiating perspective, like he's sat in draft meetings now for 20 plus years and has an understanding of how things work. So, yeah, I'd say it's going to be interesting to see how they try to marry things up. And if they do eventually get to a place at which they do want someone of deep personnel background, who that might ultimately become.
Yeah, to me, the interesting thing with Rob is he has always had a knack for bringing humanity to a position that initially is sort of identified as lawyerly, as kind of so process oriented. You have these numbers that fit into this salary cap hole that you kind of get through and go. And I think the reason that he has been able to stay as long as he has and engender the respect and the kind of the affinity that he has with that whole staff is he's been able to kind of cross that threshold to the relationship side of things and be able to, work with agents in tense negotiations, but then still come out on the other side of it. And remember also, he has been part of a couple of regimes that not necessarily weren't exactly like, user friendly in terms of, he was here with Brad Childress, who was very prickly, very, almost dictatorial in his stay as head coach. And then Mike Zimmer was another just hard-nosed, red-ass dude, who had no problem stepping on any necks. And I think behind the scenes the whole time was Rob Brzezinski, this kind of cool, easygoing, dude that just kept everyone at least a little bit calmed down in intense situations. And so you add to it that Kwesi, as I think we talked about the last time you were on, Kwesi never exactly cleaned house here and brought in his whole staff. There are a ton of Viking staffers who have been here for a very long time. And so I think that probably helps Rob's sort of ascension here, even if it is temporary or whether it's permanent. If it becomes, he's more of like the president of football operations and then you bring in a general manager underneath him or something like that. I just think that humanity that he has brought and that familiarity is probably what this team needs right now.
Yeah. And I think, you laid that out extremely well. Like when you're in a role like he has been for as long as he's been, and you wear the types of hats that you wear, you are navigating, managing, supporting so many different types of people. When you're talking coaches, evaluators, you're managing ownership, you're managing agents, and some of those situations to your point, like can become quite tense. And his ability, I think, over time to probably take the long-term view of this deal, it's not worth severing this relationship on a certain deal because of the importance of being able to get back to the table years from now. Like, I think that perspective has allowed him to sustain a job in the NFL for 27 years with the Vikings, which is unbelievably rare. And it will be unquestionably interesting to me to see what the structure looks like come the fall. And I will tell you this, John, like I've done a lot of archival work over the last few months of reading back of 2005 and how things went and worked. And what's fascinating to me is over the course of the last 2 decades with this organization, there have been so many different iterations of power structure, of titles, of who is the one making the final decision. And it's kind of, I don't know if it's to a detriment, but you do wonder sometimes, like, would it just be easier to have a very clear number one, they're making the decision and everybody knows that at all times. And I guess the fact that it's hard, it's been hard over time to discern that even over the last 4 years is interesting place to be as an organization. Like in Philadelphia, for example, Howie Roseman is making the call and everybody knows that. And that's ground rule. In Seattle, John Schneider is the guy. That's kind of, it's pretty clear. And so I, at least for me, just looking at it from the outside, you almost wonder, would it be worth it just taking the muddiness out of this? And in the end, having someone with a very clear decision-making, structure at the very top. And how would that work with managing coaches? That becomes more of a question probably, but it's been almost like curious to me that the murkiness of the structure has existed for as long as it has.
Yeah, it's a great point. It has always been that way. I mean, I even think back to, longtime Vikings fans will remember Brad Childress and Fran Foley and like the triangle of authority and who's really calling the shots? Well, it's a collaboration. Yeah. Okay, great. But there has never been a number one guy at the top doing it. And even, whether it's Spielman and Zimmer or whatever. And so, and given all of that, I don't expect, Alec, that when the dust settles on however this looks, it is going to be that way. Like I as long as Rob Brzezinski is really involved, and this is to his credit, he is not going to be a guy that says, I'm calling the shots. This is my show. You either get on board or you get the hell out of here. Like, that's just not the way that he does it. And I don't see a scenario where in May or June or whatever, leading into training camp, they say, you know what? We have hired the John Schneider's right-hand man to just take this thing over and run it like the Seattle Seahawks. Like, I don't think that's coming. Do you?
No. I would say no. And and the way I would view it from the outside is like, if you're going to operate with this very collaborative environment, the biggest key is going to be like removing ego and being very, global in your view of the decisions that are made. And Rob Brzezinski, I do feel like, can operate that way. And then it's kind of incumbent upon all other parties in many respects to row on that same, side. But yeah, I mean, I would say, like, knowing, the influence that Kevin O'Connell has had and wants to have, knowing the influence on personnel that Brian Flores has had and wants to have, I would expect it to be a very collaborative approach. And I think why it can work over the next 4 months to then get you to a place that we'll see in the future what it holds is because Rob Brzezinski will understand managing those guys' preferences and wants and view. And then in tandem with that, the scouting staff will likely have faith in Rob kind of leading meetings and structuring meetings. And that's what it sounds like over the last couple of weeks as far as their planning, as Rob has very much structured the meetings. He brought in a consultant, Matt Thomas, who's done it for a long time in Seattle as kind of a cap guy to just ensure that they are tied down in that regard so that Rob can lead some of the meetings and dip his toe into other areas of the team. But it will be, how they approach it and how ownership discusses it really at the owners meetings. Once a lot of the decision-making dust settles over free agents and draft, will be telling. Like, there's no doubt about it.
We're listening to the Viking Update Show here on Talk North. We're going to take just a quick break, and then we will get back and talk a little quarterback. We'll talk a little bit about mock draft season as that is upon us. This is Jon Krawczynski with Alec Lewis from The Athletic. Here on the Viking Update Show at Talk North. We'll be right back.
Scott for Aquarius, your authorized independent Connecticut dealer. It's 2026 and time to fix your problem water. Time to enjoy spotless dishes, softer skin, cleaner laundry, and say goodbye to funny taste and odors. Upgrade today and enjoy no payments and no interest for 6 months on a new high-efficiency Connecticut water treatment system. Schedule your free water test at AquariusHomeservices.com. Financing based on credit approval. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended.
I want to tell you about Onyx Maps Onyx Hunt and Onyx Fish. Have you ever driven past a piece of land and wonder who owns that, or maybe you need to know exactly where a property line runs? That's where Onyx Hunt comes in, and it's not just for hunters. There are folks using Onyx for their jobs every day throughout the country, from farmers and ranchers mapping out their fields, wildland firefighters navigating rough terrain, to construction workers needing to know who owns what property. This app offers something for everyone. If you need the best land ownership maps, aerial imagery, and property boundaries in your pocket, Onyx Hunt is the tool for the job. Try it free for 7 days. Download Onyx Hunt in the app or Google Play Store, or visit onyxmaps.com/hunt.
All right, back now here with Alec Lewis. I'm Jon Krawczynski, the two athletic Vikings guys. Well, one quarter of a Vikings guy, and then our full Vikings guy and Alec. But Alec, you
just come over and show up at the stadium. You just show up at the stadium and I mean, it's just it's poetry somehow, and it's really appreciated on my end. It's great.
It's easy to write the fluff when you got someone in the gutter every day. So,
right.
You wrote a piece this week at The Athletic about just J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback situation. I've been kind of trying to think about this the last, I'd say, 2 weeks or so. And I wonder if public sentiment hasn't shifted a little too far against the kid. I do think, as you pointed out, and I think that absolutely deserves scrutiny and examination, his health. I mean, certainly the completion percentage and the bad throw percentage are both, way off what you want from any young quarterback. And the way that I think that Kevin O'Connell had to really go to the Cliff's Notes version of his offense was a reflection of what J.J. McCarthy was able to handle. And so those are all real concerns. At the same time, I am having a hard time sort of looking at now the depiction is, well, he's just terrible. And there's just nothing, that he is irredeemable, and they really missed on him, and how could they do that? And wouldn't you much rather have Bo Nix, who actually hasn't been all that great, but has had some cool moments too? Those types of things. This is the way the pendulum swings in the NFL, and that's part of it. But I do wonder about how all of that is being processed internally, because I am not just ready to say this kid can't play. I would really like to see the sample size go a little larger before we, make a definitive judgment on what he is and what he isn't.
I think, anybody who feels like they have a definitive say on what J.J. McCarthy will be, to me, you haven't been observing the NFL over the course of time. The objective and the fact-based, look at it is very clear. He obviously hasn't played the number of regular season games that the Vikings would have hoped that he would play. That they would have hoped he would have played. He obviously, the production was not at the level that the team needed it to be to make the playoffs and do what they wanted to do in the 2025 season. But over the back half of the season, it was the only opportunities he had against the Cowboys, against the Giants, against the Commanders, against the Packers. Yes, it was the backups. He did show progress. He did perform. And so it's undeniable. He's only 23 years old. And so, the hard part for me is you absolutely see the flashes. You see the arm talent, you see the mobility, you see the creativity, you see a lot of times the charisma that some of the greats really do have. And then the other side of the coin is, yes, you have seen layers of the struggles of the inability to acclimate to game speed and all of that. And so the challenge here to me is pretty clear cut. You have a guy who needs further development to reach a ceiling that could be very, very high. And you have a team and a leadership group that hasn't won a playoff game in 4 seasons that might not have the amount of time that it takes. And so how do you marry those worlds up in a way that is suitable for all parties involved? That is kind of the question that they are facing and staring head on right now. And it's a tough one to live. It's a tough place to live. The hard part is if you say you have Super Bowl aspirations and then you are, removing the opportunity for a kid that could ultimately reach those heights, then, are you really making decisions in accordance with the vision that you talk about? It's a really difficult one. And, I think to the way you started that question was the pendulum swing. I think everybody wants to have a rash take on what JJ McCarthy is or what he isn't. What he is a very young player still growing and developing every single day with a ceiling that is very obvious to anyone kind of viewing it. So, it's kind of what complicates this process this next month, certainly.
Do you think, Alec, that it is a reasonable outcome or pathway if, let's say, they bring in whoever it is, Geno Smith, Kyler Murray, whoever it is, and that person, quote unquote, wins the starting job for next season? If that is the case, do you think that they have to move on from JJ McCarthy, or do you think it is reasonable that you say, hey, JJ, you need another year of seasoning, another year of mentorship. You're still really young. So we're going to go forward with one more year of a bridge quarterback and then maybe try to come back to you in 2027. Is that possible? Or do you think just the whole kind of all the politics behind it and everything else involved, you just say, if we decide we're going with the next quarterback, that, hey, we're going to either release JJ, we're going to try and trade him and give him a new start somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, is it possible? Yeah, I do think that it is possible to thread that needle. But to your point, you start to ask the question, how is JJ going to feel about that? How is his representation going to feel about that? Do they, would they believe it's optimal for his development that he goes somewhere else and is able to play and is able to play immediately? It's part of the reason why there was so much push, I think, from folks internally last spring to bring in a veteran to allow him to sit and develop at that time, knowing that you would still then have multiple seasons of his rookie contract and that it wouldn't, that he would have more developmental time. But, that would be, from a Viking standpoint, if you bring in someone like one of the veterans that you mentioned and that person would win the job, that person wins the job. I mean, you're talking about managing a very fine situation at that point to where you would understand if it played out probably anyway, whether it be trade or him staying here. I mean, the hard part is you get through the third season of his rookie contract, and if he doesn't play, then you're making a decision on his fifth-year option where you don't have the requisite data to make that decision. And at that point, if you're not picking up the fifth-year option, you have one season. Would you be better off just acquiring draft capital? You start to have those conversations and it leads you down a bunch of roads. So that's why, again, the level of quarterback play that they try to acquire here over the next few weeks is going to be very telling in terms of what their, private internal beliefs are on JJ McCarthy and what he is now and what he can be.
Right. And because the other part about that scenario is if you have made the decision this year is a Super Bowl year, that's what we're going for, or at least we're prioritizing in-season success and playoff success to give all of our coaches kind of more rope to keep going and all of those things. Generally speaking, there are going to be very few quality quarterbacks who will say, yeah, I'm going to come here for 1 year.
Exactly.
You're going to have to commit to multiple years, I would imagine. If you want a Mac Jones, if you want someone at the high end of the available market to come in, play really well, and give you the best chance to win your division, get into the playoffs, win playoff games, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's part of I've had agents already say this to me of like, the available quarterbacks on the free agent market are going to be very aware of what the Vikings' likelihood is of sticking with J.J. McCarthy. Just like last year, Daniel Jones, though he loved the Vikings, he loved Kevin O'Connell, he loved the idea of playing here, and he spent time here. He and his representation at Athletes First was very mindful of what the circumstances and the likelihood of him actually getting the opportunity were. And that's why he chose Indianapolis, which had a much higher likelihood of him starting. And so, I mean, you start to ask questions of, let's just say, for example, Mac Jones, if you are to acquire him, San Francisco is probably going to drive a very hard bargain. So it's going to take a second round pick, and you're probably not sending a second round pick for a backup quarterback that's not playing. You take a Kyler Murray for as controversial of a player as Kyler Murray is. He's probably going to be starting somewhere. And so if you are signing him or acquiring him in a trade, you're probably guaranteeing him a certain amount. Kirk Cousins is going to have a lot of opportunities, including television. So how willing is he going to be to play a backup role at this point in his career, having accomplished all that he has? It is a delicate circumstance and really hard to, try to find the path to where you're keeping everybody at bay and keeping all your options open to build the optimal quarterback room the way that they have talked about doing it. And if they can do that optimally into 2026, it will be an incredible kind of gymnastics performance for them to be able to, make it happen.
One name that you had in your piece was Derek Carr. And that just is intriguing to me as a guy who has had some success in this league, was, retired, called it quits. But is, maybe sniffing around another opportunity. How realistic do you think that option is for the Vikings or for, I guess, any other team that is looking for a quarterback here?
Yeah. He checks a lot of the boxes that you would like, if you were to jot out, what would Kevin O'Connell want here? Professional quarterback, experience, ability to run the system, willingness to throw the football over the middle, has produced at a high level. You go back to, I know it's going back a ways now, but 2021, the season that he had, and I was going through some of the numbers the other day, like it was astronomical and it was really impressive. But again, that's 5 years ago. He has suffered some serious injuries since then. If the Vikings were interested in Derek Carr, I would be very shocked if he was not willing to hit the unretire button, but then the Vikings would have to acquire him from the New Orleans Saints. So, he's definitely an option. And that's why, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, and Geno Smith, it's pretty clear to understand why they would be in the realm of possibility. Again, they've produced at a high level. They're able and willing to throw the football over the middle of the field, and they are professional and trusted to operate at the line of scrimmage, an offense that you and I both know has been very complex, and has been run as best as it has when you have a guy who has that level of experience and kind of understanding at the line of scrimmage. So those guys all of them make sense in that respect.
Lastly, it is mock draft season. Alec, one of your first ones, I think Peter Woods, defensive tackle, Clemson. Just how are you going about trying to identify talent, identify possibilities at a pick that is not top 10? And just kind of like working through the plethora of options that are going to be available for the Vikings there.
Yeah, the mock draft stuff in February. It's real mock is what I would say.
Yeah.
It's
we are mocking.
Yeah. The Athletic is a large fan of those, even in the middle of February. But look, it's pretty clear there are a ton of positions that the Vikings need when you're talking cornerback, safety, defensive tackle is always one where you you can never have enough. Tackle potentially offensively, running back. I mean, there are a lot of ways to go about it. It's good. I mean, when you're picking 18th, especially in this draft where you talk to a lot of people in the industry, there's kind of a consensus, probably like 14 really great caliber players. And then it's really what positional fit, what level of upside. I do love watching the film because I'm incredibly nerdy like that. And there's part of me that's like, do I have any idea what I'm watching? So I can look back years from now and be like, did I have any idea? But Peter Woods, the guy I think, you mentioned, he's a to use the Brian Flores parlance, he's a big guy who moves like a little guy on the interior of the defensive line. I think if you paired a guy like that with Jalen Redmond, you'd be able to rush more with 4, and that would give you more resources in the secondary. But the draft stuff becomes much more clarified once you get through free agency, because you know how the team is allocated the funds and you know what still exists from a needs perspective. The way I viewed it, because of how important safety is to Brian Flores' defense, it probably makes more sense to have a veteran at that spot. And then offensively, the center position is so big and so huge from a communication standpoint that having a veteran there also makes sense. So spending free agent money on those positions would then leave you kind of the rest of them from a draft perspective. And so that was kind of the route and the mindset that I've taken as I've approached the mid-February mock drafts. Nothing better than that.
Nothing better at all. And the great thing is we're going to get a lot more of those mock drafts, so we can see kind of your whole process evolve as this thing goes along. So
yeah, the editor put 1.0. I'm thinking, holy cow. I mean, by late April, there will be many iterations. And there are times late in the cycle you start to get names, you have a good feel, but it's, it's a dart throwing exercise at this point.
It's all good, man. He's Alec Lewis from The Athletic. I am Jon Krawczynski. You've been listening to the Viking Update Show on Talk North. Thanks to Aquarius Home Services, thanks to Onyx Maps, and thanks to Davide Rosso for producing. We will talk to you all next week.